No. Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to our Forged Men's meeting here on Sunday nights. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Looking forward to continuing and I think finishing the qualities of biblical leaders. Tonight we'll be talking about 3 different characteristics, and Pastor Ethan and I are hosting tonight. Pastor Russ is on vacation, so we are hoping that he is refreshed and doing well. Tonight we'll be talking about the 3 characteristics: being just. The other one is seeks the success of others, and then the other one is patience. And so the last one, I don't know if I'm qualified to talk about. I probably, biblically speaking, but not necessarily from experience. I'm not the most patient individual ever. But the first one there is just. Now, we've talked anything from fearing God to being having a servant's heart, to being humble, to seeking wisdom, all these different characteristics. But now we're down to just, seeking the success of others, and patience. Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 14 says, "The king that faithfully judgeth the poor, his throne shall be established forever." I think the key word there is faithfully. Think that judging is Proverbs. Yeah, Proverbs 29. I think the easy part is probably casting good judgment, but I think being faithful at that is probably the most important. I think that is what brings the justice portion of that.
Yes, because I was just thinking, because maybe we should. I was thinking about, like, do we need to define justice? But that's a really actually good definition. Is just faithful.
Judgment.
Faithful judgment. That's a really good definition, actually, because there's lots of people who make just decisions or good judgment calls, but because they don't make them like consistently or faithfully, we can't really say whether or not that person is a just person.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it seems like there's a lot of people that will make the judgment call after the decision has already been made, and actually that probably creates some inconsistency. I mean, think about a husband who is not faithfully making the right decisions. I don't think that we could consider them to be just. At least the wife, from the wife's perspective, wouldn't call them a just man or an individual. What do you think?
Say that again. I'm trying to follow.
No, I think that when it comes to being faithfully, when it comes to being just, being faithful is a key component of that. So when it comes to a wife having a perspective of a husband, if he is constantly making the poor decision or making the right decision after he's already made the poor decision, that's not showing, good judgment call or being a just individual.
Yeah, because justice is just the making a righteous, and that's not really a righteous call as much as, well, I messed up, I'm gonna fix.
It's not just after the fact,
right? It has
to be just before.
Yeah, because then it's just an afterthought, and it's not really viewed that way. Right. I look at this and I think the king, that verse that here, 29 verse 4, the king by judgment or by righteousness, right, by making righteous choices establishes the land, but he that receives gifts overthrows it. So there's the opposite side of that, right? So a king can either have righteous choices or he can receive gifts, and that kind of speaks to the idea of bribery. It's almost like, can you be bought? And I think of a lot of nations that we would today refer as like third world nations, where justice is super low. I mean, I believe you were called to the mission field. Well, that was kind of where you thought I was heading you towards. And like a lot of like the 1040 window, lots of injustice when it comes to the government. Where do they have a law system there? Yes, they do. But is it held to faithfully? No, because these guys are easily bought off. And when I think of that, and I think of a leader, not necessarily in political sense, but even just in the family sense, like we could be talking about relationships. Like, oh, that's probably the most obvious one, right? Like, oh, are you a just man can be bought off? Like, oh, well, will he make the right call, or will he choose to spend a night in a place he shouldn't be, or will this guy mete out justice to his children? Can he, or can he not? Because they know that he has a gambling problem, and so when he's trying to tell them that no, you can't, like what you did with your mom's credit card or whatever, is wrong. Now he can't be considered a just man because now they look at him and say, no, you're not. You can't tell us anything, man. You gamble. Right. There's actually, like, I'm saying that because I'm thinking of like dads I know of other people who have been known to do stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about justice today. And when it comes to justice, it's not a matter of a certain case or a certain individual. It's looking at everyone deserving of what is right.
Like outcomes.
Yeah, the outcome. So, if someone is, I don't know, if someone is done wrong, we look for what makes it right, or how to make that right, how to make that situation right. And not in the eyes of ourselves or in the eyes of others, but in the eyes of God. What is justice in the sight of God? And ultimately understanding that God is the final judge. He is just. He is always just. And I like the second part of verse 14. It says, his throne shall be established forever. And I think, again, it goes back to being faithful. And I think that being just also has a lot to do with being faithful as well.
Yeah. People won't follow somebody who's not going to be... I like that phrase. People will probably follow a leader who's always real than a leader who's always right. Ultimately, you'll have both a leader who is both right and real. But someone who is right and real is going to realize, like, hey, your behavior, your actions don't merit that. Whether that's an employer talking to an employee, or a father talking to a son, or a teacher even, or a teacher or a coach talking to a student, a kid. Your actions don't merit that, and that's justice. Not justice is continually saying, making
accountability.
It's creating accountability. And it's something you have to be faithful to. Even as a coach, like, it's really easy to, as a leader, kind of let some things slide because it's not that big of a deal. Like, okay, if my kid, acts out of line, in I get sometimes in some scenarios, kids do kid things, and there's a judgment call there. But there's many times where I think specifically, by the time the kid's like in first, second, third grade, they should have, at that point, unless they have some learning disability, developed a sense of right and wrong. So even as young at that age, and then now you're taking that kind of the accountability aspect of the parent, are they going to be a just leader where they see what the kid's doing? Are they going to let them just run amok, or are they actually, in justice, going to say, your behavior does not merit my hand of blessing on you at this time?
Right. And
if that makes sense. Maybe I'm a little too wordy, but
yeah. But when it comes to faithfully judgeth the poor, I think that also goes into the realm of, I think we all know leaders that will make a judgment call for a certain individual and won't do it for someone else. That is not justice. That is not a just individual.
Not faithful.
And not a faithful individual either. So when it comes to being a just individual, we are looking for being right, no matter who the individual is wrong, no matter where the wrong is found. And again, I think that's a lot. There's a lot of, for instance, when it comes to someone that we don't know well, but we know in the church, it would probably be easy for us to try and correct them or get them on the right path. But when it comes to our families, or someone, our best friend in the church, or whoever, it's more difficult to be just in that situation. But that's where our thrones, if I can say it that way, are established, is in those tense conversations. Right. Those times when it actually, I don't want to say it doesn't matter in conversations where you don't know the individual that well, but it really matters in your home, where maybe your family isn't going the right direction. It takes a lot of I don't know how to say it, a lot of
Guts?
strength.
Strength,
I won't say
yeah.
guts, but
Yeah.
but a lot of strength, a lot of courage, a lot of
Courage. There we go. That's
you
right.
know, it takes a lot for a man to say, look, you know, this is not the way our family should be going. We should be going this way, and we have to recognize where we have been wrong and set it right. That's what it means to seek justice, is to look at what is wrong and take it to where it should be. Take it towards truth and what is right. I don't have anything else to add to that subject.
Yeah, I just wanted to, last thing I thought would be good was just to ask you, like, what do you think some of the obstructions? Obviously, with each of these character traits, there are things that get in the way of a man exemplifying. Like some more than others. That makes sense. Everyone has their own struggles in leadership, specifically biblical, gospel-centered, Christ-centered leadership. But what do you think some of the obstacles are to men today for them being just? Being a just person.
Faithfulness. I think we've talked about that several times tonight. But being faithful at, and not just being faithful in general, but being faithful at making sure things stay right.
What causes that to be a struggle? I mean, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What causes that to be a struggle?
Yes.
Is avoiding the tension, avoiding the maybe awkwardness or the confrontation or conflict that could come about that. But actually, I think you could avoid a lot of that if you just control your spirit. And actually, you go back to the third characteristic, being humble about it. So you're not, okay, for instance, let's say you know, like I said, let's call that family meeting back, you know, into order, where we say, you know, our family is going this direction, and we don't believe, you know, I don't believe that's where we should go. Let's go. You can make that really bad. You know, woman, you know, that really bad. You know, rebellious. I mean, there's a way. You know, there's a spirit about that can make that go the wrong way.
Right, where you end up in a cardboard box inside
Exactly.
the house.
Yeah. You lose everything that you have.
Right.
But or dead. One or the other.
Depending on the
or
person,
you could just avoid the topic totally, and it would be a long-term disaster. So it's like immediate disaster or long-term disaster. Is pick your poison. Or you could just avoid both and humbly go to your family or the individual that you have that has wronged you, or you've wronged, or is doing wrong, or whatever it is that causes you to be called to accountability. Whatever situation that is, you need to enter into that humbly and not in pride.
I was going to say, because it sounds like what you're saying, like one of the things that saps men of their, because being a just person requires a lot of energy. If you've ever been in a group of, you know, been in charge of like a group of kids or a group of kids or young adult, like teenagers, being just requires a lot of energy, and how much more in like the home, and like, hey, look, I'm providing for you. I'm like working hard. I'm slaving away. I don't have time for this. And either we, you know, instead of being just, we brush it back with either harsh words or indifference. So I think, just speaking to what you're saying, I think it's almost like an idea of understanding where you're at. You know, like, okay, right now, I think Russ talks about this too. Pastor Russ talks about this, where he knows like certain times he needs to take like some time before he connects with his family, just because he knows I had a long work day. I had to make some tough decisions today. Right now, I'm not in a healthy state of mind to deal with this issue, so I'm going to wait and then come back to it. And as men, I think that's a good thing for us to do, to just to be aware of practically, is like, hey, be aware of where you're at with your energy, where like not in a mystical sense, but literally like where you're at with your strength for the day. Your spirit. Thank you. Your spirit. Or do I? Am I becoming emotional? Because if I'm becoming emotional or feeling tired or stressed out, then I'm not going to make a good judgment call. I'm not going to exact righteous judgment. And so I need to maybe take a step back, find a way to, you know, hand responsibility over for like, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, and then come back to and say, hey, okay, I had some time to think and pray about it, relax my mind. Here's what we're going to do now.
And by the way, you know what to expect from an established throne. So when you are faithfully just in your home, I'm using the home as an example because I kind of have a heart for that area.
It's
It's the most
yeah.
practical area. You can apply this to anywhere. But when you have an established throne and you have those tough conversations, your family knows what to expect from you. In other words, the future tensions of this conversation just don't exist anymore, because it's like, okay, Dad's gonna help us get on the right path.
Yeah.
Oh, my husband, he has a burden here. He sees where we need to go, and he's not just going to blow up. Like they know what to expect because it's established.
Yeah.
I think that's also important.
That actually bridges perfectly into the second one.
Yeah,
seeks the success of others. In Philippians chapter 2. Let's see, you can turn it faster. Wow, you're fast.
I have the tabs.
Cheating. I'm going to read it.
Go ahead.
I actually read this verse this morning. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others, talking about seeking the success of others. We can honestly go back and talk about love. We can go back and talk about how this relates to wisdom, but the idea is just generally speaking, a biblical leader seeks the success of others, which is can be a very countercultural idea, depending on where you are. I think here in America, I guess in the modern day, it's almost kind of skewed. The way I think of that is like the pyramid scheme here in America, or it's a really, really big thing. And I know there's lots of people even in our church community who are involved in stuff where like they're promoting a business, and a lot of that business is by getting people. Nothing wrong with that, but the downside to that kind of, I guess, economy, if you want to put it that way, or that way of doing life, is that sometimes it can become I'm serving others so that I can serve me, instead of just keeping it I seek the success of others, obviously for God, but then purely just seek their success. I mean, that's the only reason why I serve you. Outside of God, the only reason I serve you is for your success, and that's about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us can relate to this, that we've been under leaders where they were serving others to make them look good. They weren't actually looking for the success of the other individual. They were looking for the success of them. It's almost like if I build them up, it'll make me look good. And that never lasts. In my opinion, that never lasts. It doesn't last for long.
I know it doesn't last, because either that leader gets kicked out or the people leave.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it doesn't stay that way for long. Like, you could fool people for a while, but time tells if you really are investing in an individual or circumstances. So, for instance, if everything is going well, it's easy to invest in others. But when things go south, then that's when it really takes an investment, and that's when you tell if the leader, wherever the leader is when dark times come, tells you if they are serving you or themselves. That is also a reflection on us. Where are you in the darkest times of your family and in your spouse or your friend or your church or your community? Where are you in the darkest times? Are you hidden away in a corner, secluded from everyone, or are you involved making the situation better? Imagine if everyone just stepped away from hard times and situations and not invested what God has given them with a gift or whatever it may be. I have a verse here, if you don't mind, I want to read.
Yeah, go ahead.
I read this in our life group hour this morning, talking about the relationship we have with the church. It says in Romans chapter 12, verse 3, "For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith." So the way that you serve others is to see that all of us, are on the same team. We're on the same ground also, but we're on the same team. And as a family, you're not against your family members. You're not competing against anyone. You're a team. You can't compete against your families. You can't compete against your spouse. You're a team. You are as a couple, as a family, as a church, as a community. You guys are trying to acquire the same goal, and that only comes by serving one another. It even says later on, let's see, right here, it says in verse 10, it says, "Be kindly affectionate one to another with brotherly love, in honor, preferring one another." That's what love is. It is preferring the other individual over yourself. And it takes sacrifice to do that.
I also think I like that word that's kind of just stuck in there, in honor, preferring one another.
Right.
I really think in this idea of seeking the success of others, honor is a very much so lost word in our culture today, especially in the younger generations. Would you agree? Like that, just the idea of
Honor your
like,
parents.
like
What?
honor your parents, cancel culture. Like today, honor is not a thing. Look,
Right.
if we live in a culture where it's the norm to degrade someone because of one, however foolish their statement may have been, one foolish statement, degrade them. Honor and respect kind of go hand in hand. Honor is just kind of, I guess I don't know. I should look that up, but like just the idea of like, hey, like this person, they make mistakes. Yes. Do they have failures? Yes. But they've done things in their life that are worth honoring, that are worth mentioning.
Right.
And it's just and it kind of goes back to, honestly, again, I shouldn't say I hate it, but I'm kind of like, we're going back to that word humility again, where it's like, hey, I am no more important than anybody else in this room. In fact, if we're gonna be like Jesus, he put himself last. You even look at Paul; he said, "I'm the least of all." And so, just the idea of seeking the success of others. I actually, verse 3 here in Philippians chapter 2. I forgot to read that. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory. Okay, so if we're going to seek other success, what this verse is telling us is that it can't be done through strife or vainglory. Not necessarily conflict, like, because you're going to have conflict with people where you kind of butt heads or opinions go against each other. But literally, that idea of strife is like looking for an argument. So let nothing be done through strife or vainglory. Vainglory is just, again, that idea of pridefulness. Look at me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look at me. Check me out.
Look what I did.
Yeah.
Praise you.
Hey, Mom, look at me. Hey, Mom, watch. But in lowliness of mind, so contrary to those two things, in lowliness of mind or in humility, let each esteem other better than themselves. And that's what seeking success is recognizing I am no better than you, and I want better for you.
Right. And there's people that struggle with low self-esteem or something like that. Well, I mean, I agree, by the way. Some people do, but I think it builds esteem if you build others' esteem.
Right.
You build them up. And by the way, it takes what? Well, it says lowliness, which I think is directly connected to humility.
That's lowliness of mind.
Yeah, exactly. And so it says, each esteem. I'm sorry. Let me back up a little bit. But in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. It says, look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. And so I think, honestly, sometimes the reason that we struggle with this idea of low self-esteem is because we aren't looking on others. We're looking on ourselves. Mm-hmm. We see what we lack and what others have and things like that. And that's also pride. But I think when it comes to if we notice when people lack, whatever that looks like in your context, but imagine if you met that need, whether it's encouragement or whatever, a kind word or whatever it is, prayer. Meeting that spiritual need of an individual, lifting up their esteem or their confidence, or however you would want to say it. Imagine how much, I hate to say it, but confidence it would give you. It's kind of like it's infectious almost. It's like you lift other people's esteem up, they lift someone else's, and it lifts yours. It's almost a chain reaction because it's not inward anymore; it's outward. You see the effects of everything.
Well, honestly, for the believer, for a Christian, lifting others up is a calling that everyone's called to. We're literally all called to lift each other up. I guess technically, we're commanded to love each other. Mm-hmm. And when we're doing that, when we start doing that, when a Christian does that, it feels like confidence because what we're doing is fulfilling our purpose. That it's one of the basic gospel. It's been one of the basic purposes of the gospel is to encourage the brethren. Well, I guess we're encouraging a brother in Christ, and for other people, for the lost, we are literally preaching the gospel by giving them hope.
Right.
So,
and I gotta say this before we continue. This will be the last thing I say, but we'll look at this and we're like, well, what does that look like exactly? Well, I think Paul actually gives a great description of this because he says this. He says, "Let this mind," because he said in lowliness of mind. So he's talking about the mind. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Listen, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men, and being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. So let this mind be in you. How do we see the success of others? Same way that Jesus saw the spiritual success of us, is that he laid down his life. And we may not do that physically, but we can certainly do that in other ways, sacrificing ourselves, our time, our resources, whatever we have to see someone else succeed.
Yeah. Romans 12, the chapter, is that where you read from this morning?
Yeah, I read Romans 12, yeah.
With Life Group. The first two verses, the very popular verses, present your body as a living, what?
Sacrifice. Yep.
And as we sacrifice to God, part of that sacrifice is, part of the reward for that sacrifice is watching God use us to build the success in other people's lives.
Right.
That's so good. All right, last but not least, I feel maybe if we knock them all out tonight, we have to go a little bit over, but that's okay. Patience.
We should just wait until Pastor Russ gets back for this one. Anybody else in here feel adequate to come up here and talk about patience?
Oh, man.
I think this is something that a lot of men, honestly, I don't know this for sure, but something I certainly struggle with. What were you going to say? You go ahead and take the lead on this.
I was going to say, I want to read the verse first so that
go ahead.
God's word speaks, and then I can put my foot in my mouth later. Now we exhort you, brethren, warn them that are unruly, comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, be patient towards all men. Okay, listen to this. Okay, right? I'm going to break this passage down, and I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. Hopefully not. We'll see. Warn them that are unruly. Okay. I need to explain to everybody what that means? Warn people or caution. Admonish people who are doing things that are foolish and that are bad for their either physical, emotional, or spiritual health. Okay. Number one. Number two, comfort the feeble-minded. I believe this is talking about like people who are some people that the Proverbs would describe as simple, right?
Yeah.
Like people who are not learning. It's not like they are out to do wrong, but they're certainly not out to do right. They just don't know what to do. So
like discernment or like wisdom.
Right. So comfort the feeble-minded. People who don't know truth, the idea of comfort is like, hey, take them under your wing and like shepherd them, okay?
I have a word for all of these that will clearly go ahead.
Okay. Then he says, support the weak. And the weak, and again, I believe this is kind of just talking about like, this could be referring to people who are literally weak physically, people who need physical help. It could be people who are, in a sense, weak, like maybe financially, like they are poor. We're talking about the people now. That kind of dips into the people that the church is called to minister to, like the widows, the orphans.
Those who will probably never show love back.
Right. Supporting the weak and basically caring for those who in some sort of way, shape, or form cannot care for themselves.
Right.
And then it says, so there's, let me see here, unruly, feeble-minded, weak. And then it says, be
all
patient with all men, which says, hey, look, everyone is broken. Everyone has a need. And so if I didn't cover those in the first three, just be patient with everybody.
Right.
Because people are broken. People have issues. And if there's anything that's hard to be patient with, it's with issues that other people have.
Well, I was thinking children.
Oh, well, yeah, that too. Yeah.
Unruly, feeble-minded, weak. Like there's a true test to patience. I mean, I only have I have a 3-year-old and almost a 1-year-old. And so you talk about the test of patience, they're not even like teens yet. So some of you have children, you know what this is like. There is a true test of your patience whenever you see your child do something that is either right out dumb, they're feeble-minded, or they're doing it knowing it was dumb, that's unruly, or they're doing it because they can't help themselves, well, they're weak. So like they kind of fit all those categories. But
oh, man.
I think that being patient, I mean, this all goes back. It's so funny that we can link most of these characteristics to one or two attributes. I'm link this one to love. Because of 1 Corinthians 13, it says that love is patient.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. It's not an attitude. It's not a. What else would you say? It's not. Patience is not a. It's something that comes out of the love that you. So in other words, if you
It's
say
an outpouring.
what's that?
It's an outflow of
Yeah,
love.
it's an outflow. It comes through the channel of love. So in other
Mm-hmm.
words, you say I love you. Well, if you're not patient,
Do you love? No.
you don't. By definition, you don't love them.
Yeah.
If you're not patient with your children, if you're not patient, I'm speaking to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Patient with your wife, patient with your friend, patient with other people's children or wife or whatever. If you're not patient with all men, other people, can you really look at them and say, I love them, I love you?
Okay, so if we were to talk about, which there'd be too many to talk about, but the roadblocks to patience, there are a lot of them. And a lot of times it's hard for us to be patient as men, especially because we want to get things done. And unfortunately, it becomes I have things to do that, we try to justify are more important than the relationship that we have with our children or the relationship we have with our wife. And then we think about that word love as it's defined, 1 Corinthians, and one of the phrases is, seeks not his own, seeks
Right.
not its own.
Right, which kind of goes back to the last
Mhm.
characteristic.
If we're not being patient with people, what is causing me to lose patience? Is it because I'm too tired? Well, bro, you could argue at that point, you might be seeking your own. Like you're like, oh, well, I'm tired. My rest is more important than my child's character development. Or being patient, instead of being willing to endure, because patience kind of goes into endurance. Like, am I patient to wait for God to work in the season that He has me in because I don't like what's going on? Like, my life is really, really hard right now. I don't have the patience to wait. Then it's almost like that almost becomes a question of how do you actually love God, or do you trust Him enough to guide you through that time? And so, anyway, that's just kind of what I was thinking about when we were talking about this word here.
No, that actually relates to me a little bit when it comes to, I have things. I have kind of like a task list in my head, usually like 2 or 3 things. I'm like, this needs to be done, and then it's like, no, I need you to do this, and you know what this is like. And by the way, you're a great representative. I don't know if it's on the inside, but you show it on the outside how patient you are.
I'm really good at lying to people.
So don't tell me, but he's really good at that. I am not. I'll just look at them and like, no, something like that. And then God rebukes me and He says, yes, you should do that. But when it comes to, and that's actually a good point, is when it comes to patience, are you, and again, it does link to the last point, seeking the success of others, is the attention that you give to your children more important than whatever it is that you're doing?
And that's hard.
It is hard.
That's really hard
because like you're on a mission. And by the way, men for the most part are mission minded. They're like,
Yes.
okay, I have a task. It needs to be done. It needs completed, or else. And then if it's not done, these are the consequences. And it's like anything between us and that and accomplishing that task is our enemy. Your children are not your enemy, and your wife is not your enemy, and your friend or your brother or whoever it is not your enemy. That obstacle there is the channel to practice love,
Right.
patience. And so, and again, that hits. I'm preaching to myself. I'm teaching myself, because that is a daily thing for me. I'm like,
Same.
I'm very just
Same.
I have a task. I gotta get it done. And so, yeah.
I think we can wrap this up, but just a personal experience, and then we can wrap it up as long as you don't have anything else to add. But as an example, one of the things that I kind of used to struggle with was patience with children. Obviously, work with day camp, and I recognized what was causing me to lose patience, or have less patience, or be less patient, or less loving, whatever you want to say, was I had my task list on my phone or physically, hand copy of it on a piece of notebook paper. And I was constantly trying to, instead of saying, per se, I was trying to balance that, care for the kids and get my own thing done.
Right.
And that absolutely like slaughters my patience with people is when,
And your confidence too.
and your
probably,
yes. And so one of the things that's helped me a lot was honestly being, having conversations with God. Okay, if I love these people more, because that's what He's called me to do, then I can set aside that list for now because I know what God's asked me to do now. So I can set that list aside because I have to if I want to be patient. And now I can focus on loving because whatever God's called me to, He'll either give me the time of my day, like He'll cancel a meeting for me, or He'll give me more energy at the night or time or whatever. Just again, that kind of goes into wisdom. But just the idea of whatever giant was in the way of me being patient, especially with such a, impressionable group of minds, then I need to slay this. And so, guys, patience, again, the obstacle, I guess one of the obstacles we talked about just now, there are so many of them, but was just the idea of if we're not seeking the success of others, patience is me saying something that I have is more important than this other thing that's calling for my attention. And so then the question becomes, okay, is there conflict here because this is something I should not be even worried about right now, or is this a conflict because I'm not being patient?
Yeah, by the way, there are certain tasks that need to be done.
Yes.
There are certain things that can't be interrupted, but your patience, though, can be reflected by how you react to the person who is interrupting whatever task you're doing. So, you don't outburst and say, get out of my way, I got to do this.
Can't you see I'm busy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because they don't see the urgency of what you're doing, but your patience can be, look, I'll get to you in just a minute. You're important to me. Recognize. I'm thinking of children, of course, or your wife or whoever. I will get to that. I'll get to you as soon as I can. But this is very urgent. I'll complete this, and then you'll have my attention or something like that.
Yeah.
I think your patience will manifest in that area as well.
Yeah.
I think we got to.
Go
ahead.
So I was gonna say, why don't you wrap it up? And
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the next topic is, so just wrap it up, and then I'll.
Yeah, sure. We appreciate you guys joining us tonight in person and online. We hope that you guys got some encouragement from it. I get a lot of encouragement from just talking about these subjects because we know about patience and we know about serving others. It's like we know we should be doing these things, but these are constant, lifelong reminders. And I like talking about it because it gives some insight. So I look forward to our second portion of this discussion. So thank you again for joining us tonight.